with a story, which I think is very appropriate. So right after it was communist Russia, and the Rebbe Rashab had just passed away, and the Frierdiker Rebbe took over as Rebbe, and he was in shul, and there was a tremendous movement against Chabad, as has always been, and there's a tremendous movement against Judaism in general from the communist Russia. So they had the anti-Hasidus, the communist enforcement brigade that went around and tried to break up any type of organized religion, and they especially wanted to go after the Frierdiker Rebbe because he was the head of world Jewry. So 3 goons showed up in the shul one day. 2 of them were Jews and 1 of them was a non-Jew. And they came up and they had a gun sticking out and knives sticking out, and they were wearing their official uniforms and their helmets and looked very, very intimidating. And they walked into the Frierdiker Rebbe's Beit Knesset, and they said to him in heavy Russian accents, "Come with us. We're going to interrogate you. You are going to come to the office of the anti-communist investigation unit." And it was known that if you went down there, not everyone left. A lot of times you'd be sent to Siberia or murdered. And they wanted to interrogate the Frierdiker Rebbe. They wanted to ask him questions about Hasidus, about what his goals were. So he turned to them and he said, "Right now I'm davening. I'm in the middle of saying the morning prayers. And then I'm going to say Mishnayos for my father. And after I take off my talis and tefillin, I'll come with you." And they were just steaming with rage. Like, how could he possibly say such a thing? But they listened to him. He finished davening, took off his talis and tefillin, and they brought him downtown, and they started interrogating him. And he's sitting in the room with these Russian interrogators, and they started drilling him. And it's a known story. And one of them, he refused to talk. They were trying to get him to basically, surrender all the information of all the underground activities they were doing. And one of them took out a pistol, and he said, "This little toy has made more people than you talk." And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "For people who have many gods in one world, that toy can make people talk. For people like us, like Jews, who have one God and 2 worlds, it means nothing. It's not going to intimidate me." And then they got even angrier. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe turned to them and said, "I refuse to answer any more questions unless you speak to me in Yiddish." And 2 of the guards who were interrogating him were Jews. And they look at him like, "How does he know we're Jewish?" They said, "What do you mean Yiddish? We don't know Yiddish." He said, "You're Jews. You know Yiddish." "How do you know we're Jews?" So he told a story about his grandfather, the Rebbe Marash, that the Rebbe Marash one time was looking for a certain a doctor's office who was Jewish, and it was in a time and place when there was Jews who were trying to hide their Jewish identity. And this Jew was walking down the street dressed like a non-Jew, very fancily dressed, and the Rebbe Marash walked up to him and started speaking to him in Yiddish. And he got very offended. He's like, "How do you know I'm Jewish? How did you know?" He said, "Because when you were circumcised, when the moil cut off your foreskin, he attached it to the tip of your nose." That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe told him that story about the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash, it really happened. That's a true story. The Rebbe Marash, he stopped this thing.
Do we have the same one?
So the guards were astonished, and so they admitted they were Jews, and they started talking to him in Yiddish. And one of the guards turned to him and said, "I have a question for you, Rabbi Schneerson. You don't really know that God exists. You believe that God exists. Belief and knowledge are 2 different things." And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, "No, I know that God exists." He said, "Come on, Rabbi. You believe." He said, "I don't. I know." And they're laughing. They're like, "Come on. How do you know God exists?" And he asked them, he said, "Do you keep kosher?" "Come on, Rabbi. We're hiding the fact that we're even Jewish. You think we keep kosher?" He said, "Okay. Do you put on tefillin every day?" He said, "Come on, Rabbi. We put on tefillin every day. Do we look like we put on tefillin every day?" He said, "Do you keep the Sabbath? Do you keep Shabbat?" "Rabbi, give us a break." He said, "You keep kosher, you keep Shabbat, and you start putting on tefillin, and then we could talk about how I know that God exists."
Wow, that's what Reb Kors told me 2 years ago.
Meaning that the essence of a Jew is nice of a nishma. That we must surrender and do what God wants of us. We could unlock the keys to every capacity of our life. We could find true happiness. We could find true identity and true purpose. But as long as we keep trying to do what we think makes sense in our brain, we'll never get there. It's impossible, because it's not who we are. So we'll go back to our original question just to answer it, to sum up. The question is as to why we start Shabbos Bereishis only after Simchas Torah and not right after Rosh Hashanah. Is because before we go into the world and start working, which is Shabbos Bereishis, which is happening right now, the very first thing we do is tshuva, in the 10 days of tshuva. Yom Kippur, we stand before God and become completely fresh. And then we celebrate. We dance. We dance with a Torah. Every single day we do hakafas. We dance in Sukkos and Simchas Torah for 9 days while the Torah is closed. Celebrating what? That we're Jews. That our connection to God is above logic. It's above the world. It's above work. It's above our mind. It's above money. It's above all of these things. And therefore, the very first thing we're doing is we're acknowledging God. You are God. We're with you, God. Let's do this. And when it says Yaakov went on his way, when we're now re-entering the work world, I don't know about the rest of you guys, but for me it's a little bit challenging going back after being by the Rebbe for 9 days and dancing and celebrating and for bringing every night to have to go back to reality and dealing with work and dealing with all the responsibilities. It's not easy. It's not easy. But we always remind ourselves that's not the main thing. The main thing is our connection. The main thing, what defines us as Jews is not what we do, but it's who we are. And that is the first thing. Once we could connect to who we are, then we could truly succeed in what it is that we do. So the Chaim, when the Rebbe says Shabbos Bereishis defines our entire year, it means our mindset when we go into the Shabbos. Are we going to go into the year stuck in our negative loop of who we think we are? Are we going to go into the year with a commitment to reconnect, to dig deeper, to connect to God in the deepest way possible, and then re-enter into the world not as who we think we are, or who we think our neighbors think we should be, or who we think our parents think we should be, but on who God created us to be. L'chaim, Mashiach now. Lately the Rebbe